Hello OpenMaze experimenters, I'm Kyle Alsbury-Neely, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create experiment trial blocks in the OpenMaze configuration file. We'll go over how to use blocks to present trials in both serial and random order, and how you can use blocks as an organization structure for your output data. To do this, we're going to create a simple object collection task. So let's first go ahead and open up Unity. And we'll open up our OpenMaze project. For this experiment, we're going to use one of the tutorial environments that's included with OpenMaze. And in order to use one of these environments, we simply have to go down to the tutorial environments folder found in the project window under Assets and open 3D Environment 1. Then we can go up to File and Build Settings. Now that we have that added to our build, we're going to minimize our Unity window. We're going to go to our OpenMaze project folder, and we're going to open up the configuration file for our experiment. So navigate to Configuration Files, Tutorials, Experiment Configuration, and then open the Blocks configuration file. Now we're going to just dock this beside our Unity window. And you just want to have it docked so that you can see what's going on in the configuration file, but you also have full view of the Unity editor. Okay, so let's take a look at what this experiment configuration file does. So we see that it doesn't have anything in the block order, which means that we have to add a block in order for it to run. But if we look down at the blocks that are in this experiment, we also notice that each block does not contain any trials in the trial order. So let's see what trials we have to choose from. We see that the first 4 trials are instructional trials. And after that, we have these trial groupings. We first have a queue screen followed by the trial associated with that queue. So for instance, trial 5 is the find apple queue, and trial 6 is the apple trial. If we go down to trial 7, we see that it's a water queue, and trial 8 is a water trial. Trial 9 is a money queue, followed by trial 10, which is the money trial. Finally, we have an end trial. So let's just go back up to our first block, and in the trial order, we'll just run these trials from trial 1 all the way down to trial 11 and see what happens. And you could do that just by adding the trial numbers into the trial order list. And once you have the trials entered in the trial order list, we can go up to our block order and we can choose to run our first block. Make sure that you first save the configuration file. And now that the configuration file is saved, we can go back to our Unity editor and we can run this experiment. So we'll navigate to the Scenes folder to launch experiment. And then to run the experiment, we're just going to go up to the play button. And then when prompted, we're going to navigate to our blocks configuration file. And once the configuration file is opened, we can go down to the game view window, click on it, and press the space bar to start the experiment. We see that our welcome page is first displayed. We press the space bar. We see our task instructions are displayed. In this experiment, you'll be placed into a 3D environment, and your task is to collect the following items as fast as you can. To collect an item, simply walk into it. When you collect an item, you will hear an item sound. Great. Goes over the movement controls. If we press space again, we get to our preparation screen. And the next trial we'll expect to see is our apple queue, which will last for 1 second before we're placed into our apple trial. Okay, here we go. Back to the game view window, click on it and press the space bar. Our apple queue appears and then we're placed into the environment. We can look around and collect our apple. Next, we have our water queue. Navigate to the water. And finally, the money queue. And we can collect the money. Great. We've just coded our first experiment block. Go back up to the play button to stop the experiment. And we'll go back up to our block here. Now, say that you want to separate the instruction trials from the actual task trials. This will make analyzing the data a little easier. We can just choose the blocks that actually have the task rather than looking at all the data that includes all the instructions. So we see that the first queue is at trial 5. So what we'll do is we'll just create another block by just copying our first block and pasting another block in. And what we'll do is the first block will be our instruction trials. And the second block will be the actual task. Now that we have 2 blocks, we have to go back up to block order and add our second block. And again, you can just hit Control Save to make sure that the configuration file is saved. And then we can go back and run the experiment again. Now I'm not going to run this experiment again because it's going to be the exact same thing, but you can try this on your own if you'd like. Now, next, let's say that you would like to present object queues and object trials in a random order. This is really easy to do in OpenMaze. First, what you can do is you can create groups of trials which will be called randomly. In our third trial, you'll see that we have this random select parameter. And this parameter allows you to create ordered groups of trials which can then be called randomly by OpenMaze. So let's create a few ordered groups of trials. We're just going to do this by adding some trials to our first ordered list. This first order will just be the apple queue and the apple trial. So trials 5 and trial 6. Next, we can add another ordered list. This time we'll have the water queue and then the water trial. Next, we'll make one for the money queue and the money trial. Now, in order to call these ordered trial lists, we go to trial order, and instead of entering a trial number, we simply enter 0. When 0 is called in the trial order, OpenMaze will choose a random trial order from the randomly select trial order list. So in this case, when 0 is called, it will either call trials 5 and 6, or trials 7 and 8, or trials 9 and 10. Let's add a few more zeros and then change the block order from our instruction trial to our serial order block to our instruction trial and our random order block. Now when we run our experiment, we'll first run block 1 and then we'll run the block with our random trial orders. Make sure you hit Control S to save your experiment, and then head back over to the Unity GUI to run the experiment. Press the play button. Navigate to our blocks configuration file. Then click somewhere on the game window to press the spacebar. And again, we see we're going to execute block 1 first, so trials 1, trial 2, trial 3, and trial 4. Now our experiment's going to execute block 3, which will randomly select one of our trial orders from the randomly select list. So we see that the apple trial is first called. And when we collect the apple, a second random order will be called. This time, money's called. When we collect the money, another random one is called, money again. And after we collect the money, the experiment's over. Now we saw in that example that we got money twice in a row, and that's because you'll notice that we have replacement set to 1. So anytime 0 is called in the trial order, it will select a random trial order from our randomly select list. So in this case, it called 5 and 6, then it called 9 and 10, and then it called 9 and 10 again. And that's because we have the replacement parameter set to 1. So it calls our orders with replacement, meaning that each order could be called anytime 0 is called in the trial order. Now let's create one more block, but this time we'll set replacement to 0. Go down to block 4. Again, we'll enter in 0, 0, 0. And this time we'll put the end trial on as well, which is trial 11. We can just copy our trials into our randomly select list. And then this time we'll change our block order from 1, 3 to 1, 4. Again, make sure to save the configuration file. And this time when we run our experiment, we expect to see the apple displayed once, the water displayed once, and the money displayed once. Let's test it out. First we find the money. Next the apple. And now we should expect to see the water for the last trial, which we do. Perfect. Now it should be noted that trial order can be any number of trials. For instance, if we just wanted to randomize the display cues, we could do this by subtracting the collection trials. And because this block has replacement, we can add as many zeros as we'd like here. Let's add the end trial on here as well. We'll go back up to block order. We'll switch this back to 3. And now what we should expect to see is that random cues are displayed one after another for 7 trials until we reach the final end trial 11. Let's see what that looks like. And as we see, we had our 7 trials displayed, and we see our end screen. So as you can see, you can make your ordered list as long or as short as you want to. They can be 1 trial long or 100 trials long. It doesn't matter. The important thing to note is that whenever an order is selected, it'll execute the trials in the order that has been defined in the list. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And like always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. In the next tutorial in this series, we're going to cover how to create instruction trials. I'll see you then.